Imagine we are all wrong. Imagine this whole idea with Bitcoin is outdated. Imagine we are the next Peter Schiff, right? Imagine the people 10, 20 years ago that believed all the talk by the gold bugs that the banking system is going to collapse, that inflation will be high, and that gold is the right answer to this. Imagine you followed those people and invested heavily in gold. Where would you be now? You'd be down 80, 90% versus simply just buying and holding the S&P 500. If we really think about this, right? What is preventing us from being the next Peter Schiff by buying heavily into Bitcoin? All these arguments, right, that Bitcoin has very low inflation, has a limited supply, can be easily transported, etc. All these positive attributes, to a degree, they are true for gold as well, right? For gold, you also have self-custody. For gold, you have a very long positive history. For gold, you can be pretty safe that it will not go to zero. You can also be relatively safe that it won't get outlawed in your jurisdiction. It happened in the past, but it's very unlikely that it's going to happen again. With Bitcoin, that's not necessarily true, right? Bitcoin could easily be outlawed in some jurisdictions. With Bitcoin, you've got other issues, right? Your wallet might get hacked, or wherever you store it, that third party might go under. So there are pros and cons to both gold and Bitcoin. The scenario that the gold bugs were describing seems to be taking place, but now it seems to be that most of the capital is actually going to Bitcoin. But what tells us that in the future it will again be Bitcoin, and that there won't be like the next big thing, the next shiny object that people will flock into? So there's a real case to be made here that maybe in the end we could end up like the Peter Schiffs. If we simply just drink our own Kool-Aid too much, if we simply just believe in this whole story a little bit too much, maybe in the end Bitcoin will also lose against the S&P 500 by 70, 80, 90% 10, 20 years from now. Right? Who says that the Bitcoin spot ETF will really get approved? And if it does get approved, that then a lot of capital, additional capital, will flow into Bitcoin. Who says that all of this will happen? Who says that in the end, maybe a lot of the money that's currently locked up in Grayscale won't in the end hit the market? There are a lot of uncertainties. Binance could go under, which could spook the entire crypto market and also bring down Bitcoin as an extension. There are a lot of risks here, and the long term isn't even that certain. Even if the properties of Bitcoin look good to me, right? I've got quite a bit of money invested in Bitcoin. Even though this all looks great to me, it doesn't necessarily have to translate into capital gains long term. And so, of course, you can simply just diversify and hope that this will more or less resolve some of the issues. But the main question is, what would change our opinion on the fundamentals of Bitcoin? Is there a point in time where we would not age with the asset, where we would not simply just see our portfolio underperform, but is there maybe something fundamental where we would say, okay, my thesis on Bitcoin was wrong, and I would actually take that capital and put it into something else? Is there something that could change our mind? What is our investment thesis in Bitcoin really based on? I personally answered this for myself, and it's not the properties of Bitcoin, etc., because there could something come along that could beat Bitcoin, right? For example, one central issue is scalability. You need to have the Lightning Network in order to scale. And we also see for Bitcoin, for example, that it's not really massively used as a payment mechanism. It's mainly been used as a store of value. So something better could come along. The main thing I'm currently basing my investment thesis on Bitcoin on is mass psychology. It's the current long-term holders. Are the long-term holders selling? Or is the percentage of all of holders that are invested in Bitcoin that become long-term holders growing over time? That's my main thing. If I see that more and more people hold Bitcoin over the long term, that the number of wallets that hold at least one Bitcoin continues to grow, when I see that 70% almost of Bitcoin hasn't moved in the last year, and that 1 year ago it was only 65 or 60%, when I see that trend continue to grow, then I'm okay. Because then I know Bitcoin could be something like the property sector in the end, where people simply just allocate and let the money be stored, let the value be stored despite the volatility due to the relatively low liquidity relative to the market cap of Bitcoin. If I see that despite 50, 60, 70% crashes, the majority of people are not cashing out, but we rather see a continued upward trend in the long-term holders, then I'm okay. Because then I know that the social dynamics, the holder dynamics, the psychology around Bitcoin is still intact. So I'm basically reasoning by analogy here, right? I'm not reasoning based on the fundamentals that I think those properties are the definite reason why Bitcoin will go through the moon. Because the properties of gold also should imply that it would be way, way higher now than it is at the current level. Because we do see all these issues, right? We do see the issues with banking crises. We do see the issues with high inflation, with a lot of token printing. We do see all of this, yet gold did not necessarily benefit from all of this. And Bitcoin could become the same if the long-term holders are selling. But right now, Bitcoin seems to be the replacement to gold to a degree. Right? The young generation does not necessarily heavily save in gold, simply because it doesn't return enough. And we do need relatively high returns when capital concentration is already that massive. If you can't buy a house yet, you cannot necessarily save yourself up to that house using gold, because gold doesn't appreciate as quickly as houses do, because houses do have a lot of leverage behind them. Right? So capital appreciation, equity appreciation in houses tend to be higher than in gold, because nobody takes a loan in order to buy gold coins. A lot of people take a loan in order to buy houses. Now, we don't have that loan argument yet in Bitcoin either, but we do have a lot of DeFi protocols where we get inherent leverage, so that props up the price. We also see that still adoption is growing. The overall housing market itself, as in the number of investors, is probably not really growing. It's rather shrinking with the demographical trends globally. So there are a lot of things still going for Bitcoin. I still do believe it's currently the best savings vehicle. And the majority of Bitcoin holders agree, and the majority of Bitcoin holders continue to accumulate more. So I do still think it's great. But it is important, at least for my thesis, to continue to watch the numbers. Do we see over time more and more long-term holders? Do we see when crashes happen that the long-term holders are buying, and that those crashes mainly happen because of short-term speculation? If we can say yes to both, then I think the trend is fine. We can simply just continue to dollar cost average in. If we see the opposite, if we see the crashes happen because people bought 3, 4, 5 years ago and now they're cashing out, then I'm getting cautious. And then I'm strong for the lookout. What's the next thing? And the question is, where's all that capital flowing towards? Because when it flows out of Bitcoin, it's probably going to get allocated somewhere else. So the takeaway from this video is, think very hard about what would break your personal thesis for Bitcoin. Don't marry an investment. Don't get too caught up in that investment only because it made you some profit in the past, right? You don't want to end up like Peter Schiff. You don't want to be the person that buys an asset that nobody else wants to buy anymore after you. So be very, very careful and actually think about it. at what particular point in time would you decide to move money away from Bitcoin? What fundamental thing has to change for you to say, I don't want to be part of this whole thing anymore? If you have got an answer to this, then I think you can call yourself a somewhat objective investor, right? An investor that has a thesis and that isn't just buying the hype. If you can't answer this for yourself, if you think, I will stay with Bitcoin no matter what, I will die by the ship, I don't care what's happening around me, then you're simply just closing your eyes, right? Then you're not really objective and you don't necessarily take the best action at any point in time. So there must be a fundamental reason why you are in Bitcoin, and there must be a way to invalidate this. Because sometimes what was a good investment 10, 20 years ago might not be the best investment going forward. Right? In the past, there was common knowledge to have a 60-40 portfolio of bonds and stocks. This was terrible in the last 10 years. The same is true for gold, right? When Bretton Woods came and the gold standard wasn't there anymore for the dollar. You couldn't convert your dollars anymore into gold. At that point in time, at Bretton Woods, gold was a great investment for the next 10 years. But if you then stayed in it while the whole technology boom happened, you wouldn't have performed so well. So always try to play devil's advocate with yourself. Always try to figure out what would invalidate my thesis. And then watch that number very, very closely. Let me know what you think of this kind of format. This is the second video I make in this style. Looking forward to your feedback in the comments as well. And of course, feel free to join the Telegram as well. Link for Telegram is down below. Cheers.